On this worksheet, you're going to make sure that you understand the graphs, domain and range for the 9 famous functions. These are just functions that we'll use, especially at the beginning of chapter 2. So it's real important that you're comfortable with all these graphs and can very quickly write down the domain and range. So first part here, I'm just going to run through the first page. Constant function, I'm giving an example here, f of x equal to 3. Clearly f of x equal to any constant, maybe -1, anything else like that is considered the constant function. So when you plug in a few numbers, I'm not going to do too many here, maybe -2, 0, 1, 2, the constant function always spits out the output of 3. So very clearly, if you plot those few points, -2, 3, 0, 3, 1, 3, and so on, you just get the horizontal line. Okay, constant functions graph to be a horizontal line. Okay. Again, you need to know domain and range. We'll most of the time try to write it using interval notation. Remember, domain are the allowable inputs. It's the x values that get hit as you go left to right. Okay, but clearly any number can be plugged in, so the domain is all real numbers. For the range, again, remember those are the outputs, the y's. Well, again, in this case, there's exactly one output. The only output you ever get is the number 3. So we can't write as an interval. It's not a collection of numbers. It's just the one value 3. So notice we write it in set notation. It just contains that one element 3. The next two are linear and quadratic. The linear, or the identity function, is f of x equal to x. So again, this is a function that takes an input, does nothing to it, and spits out the same number. So if you plug in -2, obviously you'll get -2. Plug in 0, you get 0, and so on. Okay. This graphs fairly quickly. You see to be a line passing through the origin at a 45-degree angle. So that's the graph of the identity function. Again, the identity function takes any input and just spits back the same input as the output. Okay. For domain and range, again, any domain are the allowable inputs. And again, you can see from the graph, any value of x can go in. So again, the domain is all real numbers. Range are your y values. Remember, as you walk up the y-axis, there's always a graph. So again, here in this case, the range is -infinity to infinity. And then the last one on this first page is the squaring function. Again, fairly simple to calculate. You're just going to square the input. So -2, quantity squared becomes +4. -1 is 1. Plug in 0, you get 0, and so on. So you just run through a few points. You should know, because this is a quadratic, it should graph to be a parabola. So you have the point -2, 4, -1, 1, and so on. And you see the shape of that parabola being formed. Again, for domain and range, domain are the allowable inputs. You could certainly plug in any number you want and square it. So again, -infinity to infinity. Range, though, is restricted, right? Because as you move up, there's no outputs. You never get a negative number as an output. So the range doesn't start until you're at 0, and then all the positives. Okay, so those are the first 3. And again, what you should be able to do is not so much worry about the points. If I'm talking about the identity function, you should know that that's this function. You should be able to write domain and range fairly quickly, and then also be able to sketch the graph. Okay, same thing for squaring function. If I ask on a test, what's the domain of the squaring function, you should be able to write this right away. If I give you a few graphs and tell you, okay, pick out the one that's the squaring function, again, you should be able to pick out that graph fairly quickly.